With less than a minute left on the clock, the Wolves are losing badly against their rivals, the Stalkers. Dean to control the ball and pass it to Mason so he can. The plan works at first. Dean delivers the ball and Mason scores 2 points. But in the middle of the game, Mason suddenly notices something terrifying in the crowd. A horribly burned figure staring directly at him. Shaken but determined, Dean passes the ball to him again. Mason takes the last shot. Everything paused for a moment. Mason looks as the ball went in, leading them to victory. Everyone was happy. And Mason is surrounded by cheering teammates. But Mason is clearly disturbed. He quickly rushes into the locker room. Trying to calm himself, he notices strange goosebumps forming on his arm. While digging through his belongings, he finds a mysterious object hidden among his things. Suddenly, he hears whispers calling his name. Panicking, Mason searches for something heavy and grabs a weight. Desperate and terrified, Mason smashing the strange artifact with the weight, breaking it into pieces, but still terrified. When his teammates walk in moments later, the figure disappears. Later in the showers, he hears strange sounds as he looks down. Black smoke spreading. The burned figure suddenly grabs him by the neck and forces its hand down his throat. Mason's body bursts into flames. His teammates rush in after hearing his screams, only to find him burning to death. 6 months later, a girl named Chris moves to town and begins living with her cousin. Chris sits by the window sketching when she suddenly becomes lost in dark thoughts. Thankfully, reopen the door, bringing in food, interrupts her and offers to help her unpack some of her stuffs. At school the next day, Ree shows Chris around campus. Chris briefly locks eyes with a quiet girl named Ellie. Chris is assigned a locker, the same locker that once belonged to Mason, before she can even use it. Dean and his friends confront her, warning her not to touch the locker out of respect for Mason. Dean's girlfriend, Grace, interrupts the argument and sarcastically reminds everyone that the school is old, and most lockers probably belonged to someone who is now dead. The tension rises when Dean insults Chris, repeating rumors that she killed her own father. Before things get worse, Ellie steps in and defends Chris, but they kept on and on laughing at Chris. But Mr. Craven urgently tells. Mr. Craven decides to give Chris, Dean, Grace, and Ree detentions for causing trouble. When Ellie tries to defend Chris, she gets detention as well. Then Ellie tries to befriend Chris, who tells her she doesn't need her help. After Ellie walks away, Chris opens the locker and finds it full of Mason's things, including the mysterious artifact. Hearing some whispers, Chris decides to open it and finds a strange whistle. When she's about to blow it, the bell rings and she leaves for class. In the afternoon, Chris shows up late for detention. When she puts down her bag on the desk, the artifact and the whistle roll out. Dean thinks it's a pipe and tells Craven, who takes a closer look at the whistle. He says it's some sort of musical instrument and identifies the text carved on its base as Mayan. Craven reads the symbols and Grace writes them on a translation website to reveal they mean summon the dead. Interested in finding out the historical value, Craven announces he's keeping the whistle, pointing out that Chris found it in a school property locker. He also lets all the teens leave early, but they have to write an essay on ancient Mesoamerica to compensate. After the kids leave, Craven searches for antiques online and confirms they're very expensive. He's about to sell the whistle when he hears whispers of his name, convincing him to blow it. Craven does exactly that and the window cracks, so he puts down the whistle and confirms the sale on the website. Before leaving the classroom. Outside, Grace invites everyone to a meet up later. After the others leave, Ree tells Chris that what happened to her father wasn't her fault, but she doesn't want to talk about it. At that moment, Ree realizes he forgot something and rushes back to the classroom. He finds Craven's laptop still open with the website displaying the antique prices, which gives him an idea. Meanwhile, Chris is approached by Noah, who introduces himself as a youth pastor. He invites her to church while trying to sell her happy powder, even offering a welcome sample. At that moment, Ree comes back and tries to push Noah away from his cousin, but Noah easily overpowers him and throws him on top of a car before pulling out a knife. After talking about God and telling Chris he'll always be there if she needs him, he leaves. Ree explains that Noah sells illegal substances to the kids who go to his church, and a year ago, a child died from an overdose. In the evening, Craven discovers that the artifact is empty. He searches for the whistle everywhere to no avail. Then he hears a noise and assumes it's the janitor. But when he steps into the corridor, he sees a strange figure standing in the darkness. Suddenly Craven is startled by a hand on his shoulder. However, it's just the janitor. The mysterious figure is gone. Craven thinks he must be seeing things. Then Craven taps the janitor, then goes back to the classroom and notices that he can see his breath. Craven turns around. He finds a creepy creature with weird goo coming out of its mouth. This creature stabs Craven with both hands to squeeze his lungs until he dies. Then the janitor passes by the door, missing the scene entirely. Craven's mouth fills with the same viscous goo as he morphs into the creature, then crumbles to the ground. Back at Grace's place, Ree confesses he stole the whistle. Chris refuses to mingle with the group, but can't stop staring at Ellie. She gives herself a shot of insulin in her leg. Timmy, Grace's brother, tries to sneak a peek at the party, but Grace's sends him to his room. When Chris announces she's leaving, Ellie tries to convince her to stay. At that moment, Dean challenged Grace to blow the whistle. When she blew it, everyone covers their ears because a painful noise echoes for a few moments. Once the whistle stops, Dean tells everyone to be quiet, saying he hears something else. But this is just an excuse to fart. Chris takes off. And Ellie chases after her to extend a harvest invite festival, saying it would be really nice if she came. Chris says yes. Ellie then leaves. Chris asks Ree about Ellie's type, boys or girls, but Ray's totally clueless. At home, Chris kept on trying to think of something to text Ellie, but she doesn't seem happy with any of her ideas. Suddenly, she looked outside her window and she sees someone standing in the tree outside her window and gets very afraid, only to be startled by Ree in the room. When she looks at the tree again, the figure is gone. Just then her phone buzzes. It's Ellie texting and Chris freaks out, realizing she sent a flirty message by mistake. Ree looked at the message. It seems Ellie liked it though, so Ree reply her message, sends a cute reply to help her cousin. After Dean also leaves, Grace starts working on her essay. She keeps hearing noises and someone calling her name, but she imagines it's Timmy pranking her. When she sees the light in her brother's room going out, she figures out he's not the one making the creepy noises around her. Suddenly a weird creature runs behind her, and she hears her name whispered again. She tracks the sound and she checks behind the furniture, but there's nothing there. Just then a spooky hand touches her, and she spins around only to find Timmy. Grace is like, no way, he's too far away to be the one who touched me. The next morning the principal gathers the students for an assembly and informs them of Craven's death, saying it was lung cancer. Ellie notices a girl in front of her shaking, and her neck suddenly breaks. This girl then turns her head back to show her creepy face, whispering Ellie's name. At that moment, Grace gives the whistle to Chris, and the sudden shock jolts Ellie back to reality. Now the creepy girl is gone. After class, Ellie and Chris go to Mason's house because they think the family will want his whistle. They knock on the door, but the door is already open. The girls go inside and hear old music while noticing all the antiques that decorate the house. Suddenly Mason's grandmother Ivy appears behind them, and without saying hello, she goes on a rant about the bank taking the house from her. She told them that she traveled all over the world to collect her antiques and studied how different cultures interact with death. On the table there are lots of medicine bottles. When Chris tries to give her the whistle and says she found it in Mason's locker, Ivy replies that actually it found her like it found Mason and herself. I have got the whistle a long time ago in a shady part of Guatemala. Since then it's killed my daughter, my son-in-law and my grandson. The exact translation of the markings is summon your death. When a person is given birth to, so is their death. And everyone's death comes when it is meant to come. However, if someone hears the whistle, their death comes early and returns their bodies to the state where they were originally meant to die. Ivy gives the whistle back to Chris, saying she should have never taken it. After Chris and Ellie left Ivy's house, in the evening, the girls enter the hospital's record room. Ellie admits Mason's death was strange because he burned down in a shower, and yet they blamed it on a gas leakage. They check his file and learn that he was identified by his teeth because his body was extremely burned. At that moment someone enters the room, so the girls have to hide behind the cabinets. Mason's papers report fall and Chris manages to retrieve one of them. She reads that the body's bone structure suggests he was in his late 40s, which matches the whistle Laura Ivy shared. This means Mason was meant to die in his 40s due to a gas leak, and Craven was supposed to die of heart failure. They need to warn the others, so they sneak out before the employee finds the other paper on the floor. At the festival everyone is in costumes. Ree finds Grace and finally tells her he likes her, but she gently turns him down and kisses his cheek before going to meet her boyfriend. Dean mocks Ray's costume and Ree gets himself a drink to forget. When Ellie and Chris arrive, Noah tries to bother them and call them a slur, so Ellie kicks him in the groin. Noah grabs his knife, but Chris steps on his hand to take it. She then pokes his nose with it and mentions the child who he overdosed. Noah says he doesn't know anything, so Chris slices his nose and tosses the knife. Meanwhile, Dean and Grace split in the haunted maze, where they keep getting startled by employees in costumes. Dean sees a wheel and spins it to get a result that says, "You decide your fate." In one of the many corridors, Grace is shocked to find an old woman surrounded by an ethereal light. When she calls her name, Grace walks away only to find the old woman again. She immediately runs and calls Dean for help, but he thinks she's being silly about disguised employees. Suddenly the old woman startles Grace and causes her to fall, dropping her phone in the process. Then Grace picks up a shovel as the woman raises her arm to point behind her. She was scared, so Grace turns around and finds her again. She screams as she hits her with a shovel, which causes her to collapse as well. When Grace recovers, she touches her bleeding forehead, and Grace notices her shovel wound matches the creature's. Grace stares at the creature. Then the old woman smiles and stands up by twisting her body. She starts chasing Grace, who runs as fast as possible. Dean worries because she doesn't answer the phone and goes looking for her. Grace panics when she stumbles into a dead end, but luckily she finds a secret tunnel in the wall. She starts crawling through it, but the old woman soon follows her and grabs her ankle to stab Grace's thigh with her creepy finger. Next she inserts her hand into Grace's throat, causing her body to start changing. After some struggle, Grace breaks free and keeps moving until she reaches the center of the maze. Unfortunately, the old woman appears on the light pole and kisses Grace to finish the transformation. Before dying, Grace pulls a handle, ringing the bell on the pole. When Dean gets there, Grace has aged to death, her body all wrinkled and frail. Meanwhile, Ellie and Chris find Ree beating up a bear for Grace, and he tells them the others are in the maze, so they all head there together. They also hear the bell and rush to join Dean. Afterward, in the school gym, Dean refuses to accept that the body was Grace's own. The girls share what Ivy told them, and they both admit they felt death creeping in. Dean doesn't still believe, so Rick calls him out for daring Grace to blow the whistle, and holds him responsible for her death. Dean angrily pushes him down and mocks him for his crush, sending Ree running off moments later. A very drunk Dean enters his bedroom through the window. When he checks the mirror, he's freaked to see a guy with nasty bleeding wounds staring back. Dean was very scared. He steps back and accidentally breaks his lamp, so he flips on the main light instead, only for the man to disappear. His parents then knock on his door, so Dean pretends he was just having a nightmare. His dad's all like, "You're gonna kill yourself one day," about him drink driving. Meanwhile, at Chris's house, she opens up to Ellie about overdosing a year ago. Her dad drove her to the hospital in his car, but unfortunately, they got hit by a truck and her dad didn't make it. Sometimes she's had thoughts about it being her instead. Ellie consoles her, then kisses her, and the girls end up doing the naughty. Ray's on the roof, getting soaked thinking about Grace. He suddenly notices blood on his hands and the teddy bear, then sees a body in an industrial grinder. However, it's all just his imagination. Ree and the girls go see Ivy the next day. She's sick in bed. She explains that to stop the curse, they have to pass their death curse to someone else. By marking them with their blood. As Chris looks at the mirror, she sees her own death behind her with needle in her arm. As her death disappears, Ivy dies in bed. Afterwards, the three of them talk about what to do next. Ree wants to pass his death, but Ellie calls it murder and she is against it. They argue about it and Ree ends up taking off by himself. Later, that day at Dean's house, he sees the news about Grace's death and switches off the TV. Still in disbelief, suddenly his door opens, and a creepy hand peeks into the room. Dean throws a chair at the door, grabbing his parents' attention. He rushes to shut the door, keeping them out, and jams some furniture against it. The hangers in his closet start rattling, and Dean's death comes out to grab his head, making his body mimic the motions of a car crash. He starts getting all the injuries, bones breaking and organs getting damaged. By the time his parents manage to barge into the room, they find his lifeless body slumping to the floor. Chris and Ellie are searching for Ree in his room, but he's nowhere to be found. They stumble upon a picture of him at the steel mill where he works, and a comic about an anti-hero taking down a villain, which might be a clue. Outside the church, Noah say goodbye to the children. Once everyone is gone, Ree goes inside with a gun and shoots a vase to prove to Noah he's not messing around. The church bell suddenly rings and Ree got distracted. Noah jumps on him to try to disarm him. They fight until Ree drops and Noah grabs the gun, but when he tries to shoot, it doesn't work. Ree then clocks Noah with a tray, knocking him out. After some hours, Noah regains consciousness, to discover he's bound to a chair in the dimly lit steel mill. Ree digs out the illicit stuff from Noah's pocket and makes him swallow the whole stash. Then Ree gets some blood from his own hand and pulls out the whistle, which gives his arm goosebumps. Just as Ray's about to mark Noah, the girls burst in to intervene, but he holds them off by pointing the gun at them. Noah's begging for mercy, and the girls are joining in pleading with Ree. It makes Ree pull his arm back. Ree says that everyone has to die once, which gives Chris an idea. Just then Ree starts hearing voices foretelling his death, and an unseen force starts pulling his injured arm and dropping his gun. The girls grab Ree, trying to save him, but it's too late. Ray's body starts falling apart, because he was meant to die in the grinder all along. When only half his body is left, then it explodes. Noah loses it and blacks out. Chris is hysterical, and Ellie's trying to calm her down, reminding her that she had a plan. The girls dash to Ellie's car to get medical supplies, while Chris explains her idea, saying they can use insulin to stop a heart, then restart it with adrenaline. This would count as dying and drive their deaths away. They rush back inside with the supplies. And Chris sees her death waiting for her. They improvise with mill equipment and lock themselves in. Chris wants to save Ellie first, but Ellie disagrees. Ellie shocks her by injecting the insulin into her arm first. At this moment, Chris realizes this is exactly how she's meant to die. Chris's body drops into icy water, and Ellie holds her under till her heart stops. As she dies, Chris apologizes to her family. After some moment, Ellie pulls Chris out and injects her with adrenaline before she starts using the defibrillator. Chris is about to wake up, but her death appears in her subconscious and care her dead. Ellie becomes desperate and begins to do CPR, but death keeps a tight grip on Chris. Just then Noah regains consciousness, and he manages to escape the chair. He grabs the gun and starts smashing the door with a mace. Just then Ellie's death also appears, revealing it was the girl she saw during the assembly of Mr. Craven's death. Noah blasts a hole in the door and sticks his arm through, firing wildly, shattering the defibrillator and hurting Ellie. This doesn't stop Ellie from shouting Chris's name, which gives her enough strength to finally push death away. Chris wakes up and sees Ellie's convulsing on the floor and her own death watching. At that moment, Noah bursts in and says God has a job for everyone. He touches Ellie's blood and her death vanishes. Ellie wakes up. Noah death shows up. He starts shooting, but every bullet wounds him too. He falls immediately and his death comes closer to finish him off. Chris holds Ellie. As it turns out, a stray bullet smashed the whistle into pieces. 3 months later, Chris still catches glimpses of her death sometimes, but she learns to live happily again thanks to her relationship with Ellie. Meanwhile, a different girl discovers the artifact in her locker. At the assembly, she pulls out the whistle and blows it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more videos.